All right. Part of today is knowing what equipment is out there and what you can going to come across. Some of it's going to be book, and then we'll open up the equipment that's on the trailer. There's a mix of things on there. We'll go over what each one is. There's 2 stages. There's some commercial, residential, 2 different kinds of coils. Microchannel coil, which you can't solder effectively by their design. And there's inherent issues for servers when you go up to them and an installer puts them in and they sweat all over the floor because of poor design, and they don't list all the problems in their install book, so you can't blame the installers. When you put your hands into machines, be careful where they go. Almost lost my fingers because I hit a discharge line on a compressor, and when I'm jerked up out of reflex and the fans are going, and I got my fingers on the bottom edges of the fan, and I had to cut my wedding ring off my finger on the roof myself. So
What'd you cut that off with?
Yeah, what did you?
side cutters, snipped it, hooked part of it to the rail on the machine, needed those pliers and bit the other half off so I could wrap my finger and stop the bleeding.
It takes a hell of a thing to cut through a ring.
Do this for a living, you're
Yeah.
not that smart.
Did the wife
Yeah, no, you're
understand?
not. I'm
Sorry?
I said, did the wife understand?
Alright.
I'm on my 5th wedding ring.
Oh.
Wow. Same wife.
Oh.
You really are? Same way.
Yeah, it's like
But-
I won't even wear a watch when I'm working.
Breakaway plastic watches.
Yeah, don't wear anything you don't
All
want
right.
to lose.
They snap off. It can be the difference between life and death. What usually happens, and I've lost my rings, was we were going out somewhere, put the ring on, I forgot to take it off the next day. And I've had them crushed. Heck, I slammed one in the door with my wife when we were going out.
Mm.
And I had to squeeze it to get it off my finger. So, that's why I wear
my
plastic
boss
watches.
doesn't even like me to wear
Yeah.
metal plugs in my.
If you're disassembling stuff that you need to put it down, put it on top of the machine, you don't lose it in the dirt. If you're rooftop, you're not gonna hurt the roof. But if you have a whole lot of stuff you have to move, and your hands are full, and you have to throw it behind you, clear out of the way. So your feet are always free and you're not gonna trip.
Try to get out of the habit of putting your tools on top of the ladder.
If you carry a tool pouch or a tool belt, when you're done with the tool, put it back
Mm-hmm.
where it came from. Especially if it's a wrench. Because when you put that wrench down on top of the machine and you go to pick it back up, you're gonna get burned. Put it back in the pouch and get it out of the sun. Because of the price of copper, they've went to aluminum coils. A micro-channel coil looks like a car radiator. You can't use the same chemicals on them. They are so much more fragile than the standard copper aluminum coil. They're fabricated out of all aluminum, and typically they feed one side of the coil, it goes all the way through to the other and comes out the other side, especially on the evaporators.
Yeah.
Which is when we get into the problem where installers put air handlers standing up and you start having constant water underneath an air handler. And this is where it's not the installer's issue. But you have to have an expansion valve to regulate the refrigerant, because a typical restrictor does not allow the coil to get cold enough to have condensation all the way across the coil, so it drips straight down through the bottom of the air handler. Because on a regular evaporated coil, you would have a metering device, even if it's just a restrictor, go into either anywhere from 4 to 8 feeder tubes and feed the coil on each side, and it rolls down on an A coil.
Right.
An A coil looks like an A. On the new coils, they don't. They feed one side, it has to go all the way up and then down the other side. So you have that bridge in the middle, and where's it gonna go?
So then that's where the problem comes in. You said the restrictor.
Yeah,
This-
you have to put an expansion valve to flood that coil
Right.
100%.
The aluminum.
Yep. And you can see where it goes over the top. The
The A?
across here.
Yeah.
So it's being fed through this bottom side, through the whole bottom channel. And it goes up this side and down this side back to the suction.
One, stay to start.
Where if you look at that coil, when you get the covers off the bottom,
Yeah, but there's a
Does every single unit come with a manual on the back?
Sometimes they
Yes.
have them
They're supposed to.
stuffed.
They're supposed to.
Whatever
Every now
doesn't,
and then
how
you'll
you
find
do
one that doesn't, but
What if you
well,
don't?
you leave that with the customer. So I mean,
Requested from the supply house.
call supply house. They usually, yeah. You can usually stop by. Let's say you get it from Crane. You can usually stop by and say, "Hey, my handler didn't have a installer guide."
information about that later.
You want the warranty part out of there too.
Yeah, take the bottom panel off.
Please.
That's fine.
Well, I didn't know if you wanted me to.
No, I don't have to slide it out. Okay. Goodman got smart. They started this in the last year, where that's a micro channel coil where you're feeding one side to the other, all out of aluminum.
Okay.
This one is all aluminum as well, but it's still a traditional fed coil. You're feeding both sides at the same time. Return suction's coming off the top, so it's pushing liquid in the bottom and pulling up and sucking it out at the top. It's better distribution of the refrigerant and
I'll move out of the way so you guys.
creates less problems down the road.
yeah.
They don't plug up as bad. If you look at the fins on this, on a regular one, or even the condenser there, you can see all the lines that tie between those. They plug up very quick, and you can't clean it with the same cleaner you can clean the copper aluminum coils.
Yeah,
Yeah,
destroy.
separate it. Right. The motors on the air handlers, you have multiple speeds. This is a regular PSC motor. It's not the ECM that goes bad. It has a capacitor for it. It's in the back of the blower.
Yeah.
And it's reliable, and you have to adjust your motor speeds. Typically 400 cubic feet per ton. High humidity areas, you back it down to medium high if that option's there, and then it comes out to 380 cubic feet per ton. Slower air, it pulls out more humidity, more condensation. This has to go to a condenser, which would be similar to the one over there. This goes inside, at a closet, wherever.
That's
Left hand or right hand discharge. If this air handler will do all four positions.
Right.
This is set up as an upflow or a left hand discharge, which means you're looking at the panel, it will lay down that way. To convert it to a right hand discharge to lay down on this side, you have to take the coil out and the pan and flip it over. So it lays on the condensate comes off the bottom.
by God, make sure you get it in there the right way.
Yes.
Yeah, it has been habit that some installers, not ours, they screw up and they put, if you look at the taps, this one's lower than this one. So this is the main drain and this is for the overflow.
Okay.
Occasionally at the end of the day when you get tired and frustrated and you don't pay attention, you hook your drain line to this and the overflow to that. Yeah, we did it too.
But you have to drill out the overflow.
Yeah, some of the machines, yeah, if you have issues, guys, and you keep getting water, make sure that the installers knocked out the overflow.
Yeah.
Or they knocked out the main drain, because some of these machines, you have to spin that air handler. Not the air handler, the coil. Spin the coil. The one on the left is the main drain. The one on the right is the overflow.
Yep.
You have to punch that hole out, or it doesn't work.
Yeah, like,
See the cap?
yeah, you got Jody.
And this actually,
pop that out.
yeah, on this brand, that's clapped too. You have to punch out the one you want. So if you lay it on the side, these would stay intact. You'd punch out the ones on the
And
pan.
which, this is the, which one?
That's the main drain.
And that's the,
Overflow.
So this is the one you punch out.
On the sides of the
Thank you.
coils for like American Standard train. And you got to take those, put them on the other side. And they always put them.
Almost right.
This is where the fixed piston would go in if it's going to be a fixed metering device. If it's going to be an expansion valve, you take the piston out and it screws onto the front. If you show up to a machine that's not working right, if they've had issues with the machine, if they habitually have condensers plugging up, they have a male dog that has worn out the bottom of the condenser because male dogs lift their legs. It will start breaking down the oil in the compressor and it will plug up the metering device. And you have to take it out and clean it. If you're looking at it and it's just not right and it should be doing completely fine, go back to basics. If you can't get the refrigerant through, where's the restriction? Pull the metering device and you probably find out it's plugged, or it hasn't worked right since day one. Somebody's just moved into the place. It might not be the right metering device for the system. Manufacturers match condensers to air handlers, and they will have different size air handlers to the condensers. When they get installed, if somebody didn't pay attention and put the right metering device in that comes with the condenser, you couldn't have problems. And it may have been the old lady that had the structure before and lived with it for 7 years because they kept telling her there's nothing wrong. And she believed it. Somebody else moves in and they're not buying it. There's a problem. It doesn't work right. Wherever they came from worked better, and this is a newer machine. Why? As the air is leaving the coil, the humidity will start, the condensation will start to be put back into the air because it's going across a warmer section of the coil. So it gets into humidity control. When you get into bigger machines and you've got 4 stages, you really got to be careful how they stack the coil so that you have first stage in the right position.
Yeah, if you don't, you can get severely hurt.
Package unit, everything is in one place. That motor is a
What is
replacement ECM motor. It's made by Evergreen. It's an aftermarket replacement. As long as you have the right horsepower, you could drop it in.
In my opinion, the easiest install.
So
Not deal with copper,
that side is a condenser.
Yeah.
The evaporator
ducts,
is here,
and electric.
across the blower,
That's all
then
you
across
have
the
to do
heater.
is
So it's pretty simple.
high voltage, low voltage, and connecting the ducts to the right side.
If you don't make sure, if they don't stay pitched correctly so that the water comes out in the right spot, the bottom starts to look like that and rusts out. When the bottom gets flooded on a package unit or an air handler and the insulation gets wet, it loses its insulation value. Then you start having equipment dripping water everywhere. Thing we're told has to be antibacterial this and antibacterial that, but it kills the good bacteria that's on our bodies.
Yeah.
He took the equipment out, threw it on the front lawn, finished the job, went out to the equipment to load it in his truck, and Mother Nature's great with the sun. It tells us an awful lot. He looked at the pattern that looked like a spider web, and it was white. Aspergilla mold.
You get one.
No doubt what it was.
Yeah, sure.
After going through the hospitals and almost dying, he did the research on his own and told the doctor what he had. And they says, well, you don't have AIDS. That's the final end stage of AIDS. He goes, no. It's also something that you get that only we get in the United States, because when you go overseas, air conditioning's not a big deal. Where he did the job, they went and condemned the house and took the lady out of the house. She had the house at 68 degrees constantly just to breathe because of the mold. Put her in a nursing home at 74 degrees. She suffocated in 3 months and died.
Wow.
Just from this mold being in her house.
Yeah.
That's why when you got mold in your house, you have to
It's
get
in
it
the air. It's in
Otherwise
the
you
air
got-
conditioning system. It's all the
Keep
air.
on
Blower door does its technical term is a blower door infiltrometer. Translates to big ass fan.
Yes.
We put it in a doorway and we make the structure negative pressure. And the equipment tells us how much air is being pulled through the house. You have to have 5 to 7 air changes per hour in a house to have a healthy environment. If it's too tight, you don't have enough fresh air.
Nope, you need fresh air.
If it's too loose, you cannot get control of the humidity. And to the point that we have to do blower doors to make sure that we have enough air change for a healthy house. And after a house gets built, before they can get a CO, before you can get your mechanical inspection, you have to have that report signed off on. There are 4 different licenses that cover that, or it can be done by a licensed mechanical contractor. However, you cannot test your own buildings. It is a heat pump, but things in different locations. That unit is a 10-ton straight cool, 7.5-ton straight cool condenser.
Yeah, for a while.
Alright, this is a heat pump, and what makes it a heat pump is that reversing valve.
This one right here?
Yep.
Okay.
That's what changes position of the coils. They call this a spiny fin coil. It is still one, well, they don't make it anymore, but it is the best coil that was ever made. Style coil dates back to 1970s.
Ah,
This is an expansion
This,
valve.
this stuff here, the spiny, that's what he was talking about.
oh yeah.
That's an expansion
I-
valve?
That's an expansion valve. That's what moves the refrigerant into this coil when it goes into heating mode. Because a heat pump is an air conditioner installed backwards. We're moving heat from one place to a less objectionable place. So when it goes into heating, we're taking heat from outside and putting it inside because it's less objectionable inside the house when it's 30 degrees outside. That's the control board that operates the reversing valve, tells it when to go back and forth with the coils. There are sensors that clip onto the coil that say, okay, we're freezing up. We need to clear the coil because when it's frozen, you can't move any air. It doesn't work. It goes back to an air conditioner, turns on the heat strip inside, warms the coil up to thaw it out. When the coil shows that the temperature is right and it's cleared, it'll go back into heating mode. The valve will slide. You hear this great big whoosh, and then the compressor makes all kinds of sounds. Then it all goes back to normal. What did you observe?
I was observing all of the reading on here, making sure what it means, and I was observing all of this,
Good. Is the air handlers, the transformer that powers the low voltage, 5 tons and less, the transformers in the air handlers. What it is. What the purpose of this does is when it's cool outside, the head pressure drops. If you don't have enough refrigerant pressure across the metering device, it won't work. You have to have 100 pounds across an expansion valve or a fixed orifice to have it work effectively. So if it's cold outside, you're not going to get it. When the head pressure drops on this machine, it was set for 190. If the pressure goes below 190, the fan turns off.
Yep.
When the pressure comes back up to 250, the fan turns back on. That keeps my liquid line full of the pressure I need and full of liquid. The serial number on the compressor. It says 16K. Emerson is a Copeland. The K is for the month. The 16 is the year. So I'm not going to do the math to tell you which K the month is, but that compressor was made in 2016. That band around the bottom is a crankcase heater. That's to make sure the compressor oil in the bottom stays warm.
K would be the November.
Refrigerant becomes liquid at the coldest point. So if the compressor during the winter is the coldest point, it's a great big heat sink. If it becomes full of liquid refrigerant and it starts up, the liquid refrigerant displaces the oil. See how long your car engine runs without oil in it? Same thing with this. The refrigerant does not displace the oil and the compressor stays intact. That is a scroll compressor. 80% of the weight is from the top of that box up. The sight glass on the bottom is to make sure where my oil level is. Commercial's different than residential.
This thing?
Yep.
So if it's low, it'll be like down there?
I have to have a third to a half a sight glass of oil.
Okay.
Otherwise that compressor will come unglued. There's a contactor that turns this on and off.
Right there. Okay.
If that's pulled in or not.
If it's pulled in, what do you mean?
That push it in. That's pulled in. So that's pulled in and you have voltage. You have a problem with the compressor, bad capacitor, something like that.
Okay, that's your capacitor right there, right?
Yep.
You
Okay.
could, yeah.
And if that's pulled in and nothing's going on, and you have voltage, you probably have a bad cap.
Oh, that's another capacitor. Okay, okay. This was in a box.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be. It's supposed
Okay,
to
it
be
was why I was in a box.
one by itself. That is the suction line. Always.
Okay.
If you have to work on a heat pump in the winter and it's in heating mode, you have no low pressure port to hook to if that one wasn't there. You would have one line that on 410A, about 410 pounds of pressure, and the other one about 350 pounds of pressure under normal conditions. So they have to provide a port that you can hook a gauge to for low pressure, because you cannot charge your system under the pressure setting.